recording.
Okay.
Okay, and go to the Facebook and we're starting.
It's the strange thing about going live on Facebook. You never know when it's actually happening or not. So let's start talking and presume that we are that we are live on Facebook. I'd like to welcome everyone here that's in for the conversation and everyone who's joining us. Oh, meeting is now being streaming live on Facebook. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this conversation. My name is Mark O'Brien. I am the outgoing director of the Axis Theatre in Dublin, and I'm the incoming executive director of the National Theatre in Ireland, the Abbey Theatre. It's great to see so many people on the call, and what we're here to talk about, a very small topic, the future of theatre. So if we can solve that in the next while, that'll be absolutely fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I might kind of, rather than just kind of going around to everybody, I might just kind of start with talking to a few people about who they are and I suppose why you're on the call and what your interest in the call is. Can I ask people who aren't talking to mute because, and then we can come off mute when you're talking, because there'll be a lot of feedback on it. So if you're not talking, if you can mute your microphone to avoid the feedback. So let me start with Belle. Belle, because you're right beside me on the screen. Do you want to introduce yourself, Belle?
Hi, my name is Belle Hansen. I am currently in Melbourne, Australia, where I've just graduated from Victorian College of the Arts, which is the University of Melbourne. Yeah, that's me.
Cool. And Adrian?
Yeah, hi, I'm Adrian Pavone, and I'm from the University of Toronto, obviously in Toronto. I'm from Toronto as well.
Brilliant. Pardon me now, I'm probably going to get my pronunciations completely wrong, but Moyukh, is that right?
Yes, it's Moyukh.
Moyukh.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I am also from Toronto. I am graduating this year from the University of Toronto, double majoring in peace, conflict, and justice, and of course, drama, theater, and performance studies.
Cool. And Siti, is that correct? No?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, correct. I'm from LASALLE College of the Arts. My classmate is Becky. She's right here. We are doing our BA in acting. So yes, we're from Singapore.
Cool. Well, let's go to Becky then.
I'm actually from BCA. No, I'm from LaSalle in Singapore, and I'm doing my degree in acting.
Okay, cool. And is that Szymon or Simon?
It's Szymon. It's Polish
go.
name, but you can call me Szymon. So my name's Szymon Bujak, and now I'm graduating from AST National Academy of Dramatic Arts in Krakow, faculty in Wrocław.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome people who are listening in. So I suppose it's a very broad topic, and I'm really interested in kind of talking to you guys because I'm probably at a different, well, I am at a different stage of my career to people here. And I think, so the future of theatre in some ways are the people that are on this call. So I'm kind of interested, particularly as we have been in and emerged from this, probably the strangest time that hopefully that you'll ever see in your lifetime in the live performing arts. I suppose I'd like to ask you to kind of maybe just talk about what the present tense of theatre has kind of felt like to you through your college, or to a very different college experience, I would imagine. And yeah, and Belle, I'm going to start with you again. Like, how did you find that experience over during the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, yeah, it was a really, it was a whole year of a bunch of unknown as to what the end product was going to be for us in making our show, because our third year at VCA is all about making this last like big work in the theatre making course. And then with the pandemic hitting right as we start to make our groups for this work, and restrictions just being this absolute who on earth knows what's going to happen next. It was this weird sort of recalibrating every week as to what our sort of end product, what we wanted to say, what that was going to be.
Yeah.
Because we've been training for 2 years in doing things in person, in space, how to devise all together. And then all of a sudden we're sitting on Zoom calls trying to make work this way. Yeah, it was a real test of resilience and really trying to become as resourceful as we physically could be with things that we didn't know how to do. We didn't know how to make digitals. That's not what we just trained in for 2 years.
Yeah. Would everybody share that experience? Would that be similar? Does anyone else want to come in there? Adrian?
It was a lot of similar concerns of like, what is this going to look like in the end? We've just been training for the last, for us, it's 2 to 3 years before our main stage year. And it was a lot of like, what is this going to look like? We're going to be with green screens. We're going to, how's this even going to look? And we've seen some theater that has some digital online theater that has green screens. Some of it doesn't look too great, or at least at the time it didn't look too great. And I think our technical people did a pretty good job of making it work. But it was, I mean, for a lot of people, they just didn't take main stage this year. They just deferred it a year, or some of them, they didn't finish their major. It was different than what any of us expected, of course.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I think, and we'll come back to this in a second, but it's interesting in a way. I mean, you mentioned, Belle, you mentioned resilience there, and you mentioned, I mean, one of the things that, you know, in a strange way, but one of the things you're going to really need in a career in the arts and theatre is resilience. So, you know, nobody expected to get a crash course in it like this, but hopefully in your careers down the line, it will end up being something that can be of benefit to you. But Siti, I'm kind of interested, say, you know, in looking at, say, what you expected, say, when you kind of started college, when you're kind of dreaming of this and wanting to do this, what did that future look like to you?
Honestly, because none of us would have expected COVID. So what I came into school or university, I came in with this mentality that, okay, with every show that I do, it's gonna be a full house as per normal, and then COVID hit. But I think after listening to Belle, after listening to Adrian, I think it's a little bit different for Becky and I, because this past year when we were doing our shows, thankfully for us, the COVID situation here isn't too bad. So we could go back to campus, we could have rehearsals in the studio, and we even had our show in the theater. But the thing is, we could only get LASALLE audiences. So as long as you were a student or a lecturer in LASALLE, you could come for the shows. But for outsiders, you could not. So we had to do filming. We had to film first for like 2-3 days. And then after that, we had our live shows for the next couple of days. So it was an interesting experience. And honestly speaking, it didn't really sit right with me, just because I knew that, okay, this isn't what theater is supposed to be, right? But it did teach me a couple of things. Like, I realized afterwards that theater doesn't necessarily have to be a stage with a set and with live audiences. It can still work if it's filmed and then later showcased to audience members. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of conversation in Ireland is now about that kind of, and has been the whole time, between that interface between digital and live and what's missing. So Szymon, what do you think is missing? Like,
in digital performances, I think the biggest missing is contact, live contact between the viewer and between the actors or other performers. I think in future will be also digital performances and live will be together, but the digital performance never ever will I don't know how to say it, but
replace.
They won't be the same, never.
Yeah.
Because the contact is contact in theater between the viewer and the actor is something really, really vital, and I think it's the most important thing. Like the contact with a real person.
And Moyukh, would that be the same for you? Is that kind of what's primarily been missed?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Echoing what everybody has said, the experience has been very similar for me as well. And I think the biggest thing that's resonated with me from the conversation so far has been the idea of resilience, which is that although we've been missing many of the elements that we expected from theater this year, as theater students, we've had to find ways to negotiate with our circumstances and, you know, bring out what makes us as artists unique anyways, which is creativity. So finding ways to deal with the fact that we're online. Our production, A Midsummer Night's Dream, was completely online, completely digital. We didn't have any choice to go in person while we were expecting to have a live theater performance. So figuring out how do we create that sort of, action reaction in the present time, because we wanted to create something that was brought in the essences of theater, using what we had so far learned in our training and using it in this new platforms. But through that experience, we learned other skills such as filmmaking, elements of filmmaking. And I think going forward, of course, we don't have that. And for theater lovers, that can't be replaced in any other way. So hopefully, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that's going to be coming back as soon as we can be together in person again, maybe even more so. But also we've learned about these new ways of creating theater, and I think that's going to just enhance the way that we create art.
Okay, that's interesting, and it kind of bleeds into the next question. But Becky, I'm just kind of interested in what you're saying there, or what was said, that you had a similar experience of being able to perform live. So you're kind of one of the glory people in the last year and a half to actually be able to perform on stage. And I'm interested in this space now when we're talking about the future, when we're talking about what happens next. And I'm interested in what you said there, Szymon, about the contact, because do you think that, I'm going to ask this of you, Becca, do you think that something needs to be live streamed, or needs to be to have the same, does something live streamed as in that you're watching it live? Is there a difference from an audience point of view, not from a performer's point of view, but from an audience's point of view in watching that than something that's pre-recorded on stage?
I think there's a huge difference. And for me, when I came into LaSalle really excited for the productions, and knowing that all of our training was building up to production time to see how you can communicate with a live audience. And we were very fortunate because we got the half experience. We got to do it for a live audience, and then also do it when it was filmed. And so as a performer point of view, it's a different story. But I already decided that I never want to watch a theater show that's been filmed. I was like, no, it can't be the same. I was like, no way, it's gonna suck, because you're not there, you're not feeling it. So then I was like, okay, wait, I haven't seen anything yet, so I can't judge it. So the other day I actually signed up for an online performance, and it was quite interesting because it was a one-on-one show. So it's like we would go into the Zoom and it would just be one spectator and one performer. And so that was that was me trying out, seeing how it would be as a spectator. And even the performer kept telling me, he was like, if COVID wasn't a thing, I would be doing this on you, because he had to teach me how to draw something on my arm. And he was like, if we were in person, I would be doing this for you. And you could just feel that there was he was trying his best to kind of emulate the experience that it should be in person, but that there was so much lacking, and that there's so much that he could have shared more with me. And I too felt like with the monitor, with him on a monitor as well, you're just missing out on so much. And for me, online theater, it's not the same.
And there's something interesting that I've seen and noticed, because I think it's absolutely not the same, but it's also not film. And it's kind of got this, I find it an incredible intimacy in some of the online digital theatrical interactions that's very difficult to get. I mean, even now, like, you know, the majority of us are sitting in our houses and talking to each other in rooms that we will never see. Do you know what I mean? I think there's kind of something, and even about Zoom, there's something really intimate about kind of, you know, you talking to people who are now working from home, and you can hear their dog and their children walking by. So I think that's a really interesting space that we kind of have by accident, I think, created for ourselves. But as we move, so what do you think, a couple of you mentioned that we may bring some of this learning, and let's leave resilience for a minute, we'll come back to that, but on a purely kind of technical basis, or from a performative basis, from your skills that you've learned as performers or makers in school and college, what do you think the future is that's going to assist you with, say, as makers in the future? Adrian, I might go to you with that. And again, there's no right or wrong answers here. I'm just looking to kind of see what your response to that question is.
Yeah. I think, and I don't know if this is what will come about with theater, because I'm sure there will still be digital theater even when we can still congregate. I think the important thing that creators need to think about is, what is the medium that you're working with, right? Film and TV, they've basically perfected this thing of showing you snippets of a performance, snippets of a story, right, in the perfect order to maximize on the impact on an audience. And theater's done that for a very long time. It's probably the oldest dramatic art form, right? Right next to like just classic storytelling. And I think like that online one-on-one performance, I think what it was lacking was the appreciation of the medium, because you can't just take like a physical thing and say, okay, you're gonna do this as the audience member, because it doesn't achieve the same effect as it is supposed to achieve, right? So I think, if anything, there should just be much more care taken in observing the medium and observing how best to use it in order to maximize on the impact on the audience.
Yeah. And do you think, so just to ask a follow-up quick question for you on that, do you think that will lead to, do you think it will lead to a reboot, or a more recognition from both audience and actor and kind of direct, you know, the team in relation to the live moment and the precision needed around that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, right? I hope so. I think there's a lot of theater that is really good at engaging with the audience, because, you know, there are good little jokes put in here and there, and the audience can respond and whatever, or the music is really good, or the characters are just so compelling. And there's a lot of other theater that they really just put some people on stage and they just talk a lot, and it worked for the old kind of theater, but we're in a different age now that might need something else. Okay. And I think that appreciation of the audience, I think the appreciation of what we have at our disposal, like some theaters, and it's more spectacle, and spectacle, it can hold attention, it's not necessarily good, but some theaters are working with like live motion capture, which is a little janky when you look at it at first, but it's pretty incredible stuff and an incredible direction, I think, to take theater.
Yeah, I'm interested in, say, you guys, like, who are, you know, you've lived right through it. You're the kind of next generation of kind of people coming out across the world, and you've been through this time. Has your perception of theater changed from when you went in, and you know, obviously through your studies, but also through a societal kind of pandemic, and then you come out. Because I'm also thinking as well, you know, Adrian, what you were saying there, beyond COVID and digital in that space, the world has moved on in relation to connection. I mean, Zoom, this conversation probably wouldn't have happened in this way, you know, pre-pandemic, but it's so amazing now that you can just kind of do this and put it out live on. All that technology was already there, but the fact that we're now using it habitually is interesting. So I'm just interested, and maybe I might go to you, Moyukh, first on this. Has your idea of what being a performer or theater is, has that radically changed in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going into my studies in theater in university, I didn't know much about theater. I just knew that I wanted to do it and I wanted to learn about it. So I had a very traditional idea of what theater was. And, you know, over the years, and especially during this time, the concept of theater for me has become incredibly broad. It can be so many different things. It can be just a voice. It can be a podcast. It can be live. It could also not be live. It can be a merger of recorded pieces with a live performance. The entire idea of how to connect with an audience, I think, is a lot broader. And I think it's exciting because we don't know what we could potentially do, and with this digital age, what can come next is very exciting. At our school, we have this technology lab where we develop theater with technology, with, you know, the concepts of robots, with digital rain falling and digital sand, but then live performance on top of that. So I think just the concept of theater has become broad, and we've been intersecting it with different ideas and technology. So who knows what we're going to do next? Yeah.
Anybody else want to respond to that as well, rather than me? Siti, do you want to say something, guys? Siti, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Belle. Yeah.
I totally agree. I also think that having trained during the pandemic has sort of brought a new wave of multidisciplinary artists who can now make work in a digital form, and for one person and for an arena of people. It's like we've come out with a whole new skill set that a lot of artists haven't spent 3 years, 5 years, however long your course is, mastering. So I think having whole cohorts come out with sort of the COVID version of theater as well is really going to shape this sort of digital and live amalgamation of theater, rather than just going back to the old way or moving forward with a new way.
That's really interesting. Anyone else want to come in on that? Yeah, Becca.
Well, for me, I was thinking about there's more of like an amalgamation of content, because now this one thing that the entire world has gone through. So now we have this one shared experience. And I think, I mean, it's unfortunate that it's a virus that is our shared experience and not, I don't know, something else more positive. But like that now we have this, and like it's something that the second you mention it, COVID-19, it's like, oh yeah, it's COVID-19. Like, and then everyone has like that thing where it's like they have their own version of the experience, but it all comes back to one theme. And I think as upsetting as it is, it's really quite special. So I think content is going to change in that way, that now this is one thing that we all can share and we all can relate to.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point, because yeah, like the fact that there is, you know, because theater obviously in its essence is the live act, and as you said, the contact piece, but it's also context, like socio-political and environmental context. And probably for the first time ever, like obviously we all have themes of love, hate, war, you know, all those major human things, but an actual event, and not just an event like an Olympics, but like an event that actually has affected everyone's family lives, you know, that's a really interesting communal time, which in some ways matches that communal sense of, so that's a really interesting point. Can I just ask in relation to, what about, how would you respond to people who feel that because I was, you know, really interested in at the beginning of COVID in Ireland, when the online stuff started to appear, very like you, Becca, there's people going, no, absolutely not. But also there's people going, no, absolutely not kind of going, oh, that's not theater or theater. And it was really interesting conversations about, well then, okay, this fear about theater going to die. Like theater can't die because it's about people kind of meeting in a space to tell stories. That's kind of, you know, that's we're the cockroaches of the world, you know, that's not going to kind of ever be gone. But just in relation to the format, do you think that there'll be a space created which is not the balance of like leaning into the digital, or will forces, or we'll all want to kind of get back in a room together? Sorry, certainly in music, like music is very simple. People want to go to gigs now. They want to be in those kind of, you know, sweaty rooms listening to loud music with their friends. And is there an opportunity for theatre to kind of to get into that group rather than being seen to be something separate out there that's people don't know what the hell it is really unless you're in it yourself? Do people know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense? Does anyone want to come back and I don't want to pick someone out and kind of go, you please. Does anyone want to kind of respond to that? Do you think theatre is going to radically change? I will pick someone. Szymon, do you think theatre is going to radically change?
It's really hard to say. It's probably will be new kind of the viewers of theater. I think there are people who really like to watch online theater. I'm not kind of that person. I really hate online theater, but I knew that are some people that they are really enjoy that kind of form of theater, because they are saying, oh, I don't have to in my town I don't have a theater, and now during the pandemic situation I could watch hundreds of shows without going to a bigger city, which which in that city the theater is, because I am living in small town and I don't have to go out of my home, and I can see shows and theater spectacles from almost all over the world. But so maybe there will be this kind of change that that will be new kind of the viewer, not the viewer only from home.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I think there's something though very interesting has happened, because before COVID, the big, like, you know, across the water here from us in Ireland, say the National Theatre in Britain, they have their NT Live, which kind of you can watch in cinemas, you know, that was for years. But now, you know, because of COVID, there are, you know, online websites where you can get subscription based, where you can watch really well. I mean, I think Adrian, you made a very good point. It's also about the medium. Like, you know, those big shows are filmed exceptionally well. So they're filmed over 3 nights. You kind of get the feeling of being there, which is very different to say something like us talking here. But I'm really interested in kind of the democracy that's happened around accessibility to work. That yes, you're hoping that that's great that people in smaller towns, or who might be from communities who may not even know what theatre is, have access to see something. That we're not saying it's the real thing, but in some ways, like movies, it nearly behaves like a trailer for the real thing. So, you know, you kind of, that's what you'd hope, because I do think, I don't know what it's like in your countries, but I think in a lot of places that I've worked in and visited, there's a presumption that from people that work in theatre that everybody else should know what theatre is, and they don't. And why would they if their families, or if it wasn't in their lives? And I think it's a really interesting way of people getting to see what goes on inside a room, you know, or gets to hear from people. Belle, do you think theatre is going to radically change in the future?
I think it's less of a theatre's going to change well, theatre's always going to change a lot in the future. Theatre changes as the world changes. So as different things come up in the world, yes, all of theatre will always be changing, and that's what's so fantastic about it. I think when it comes to the digital theatre though, what I found really exciting was the works that were made specifically to work for the digital platform, not filmed theatre works that were made to work for the stage and then streamed onto a digital platform. I think that it's almost like a whole genre within itself, in that when we talk about digital theatre, we're not talking about theatre filmed made for a stage, made for like the black box theatre and put on the internet. We're talking about like a camera that's a character within this theatre world. We're talking about theatre that moves, with like whatever you've done to be like, this is my framing, this like screen is my stage, and this is how I'm gonna like present this work to you. Yeah, so basically work that is made to work best digitally, I think, is a whole genre that's gonna continue to take off and grow.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. And I think it goes back, Adrian, to something that you said about the medium. Because for me, I don't know, I really don't, I think digital theatre is a wrong term, and you just named it there, Belle. I think there's like, it's a very different thing to have a piece made like this. You could call this digital theatre, you know, if we were doing a show, if we design something for this space. And I've seen great work in that space, but I've also seen really horrible work of a camera stuck there on a play that's kind of going on, and you're kind of going, oh God, no, please don't do that. But then I've seen 50 cameras recording a play, and it's extraordinary. So I think the digital is purely the medium rather than the thing itself. So if you as an artist have something that you want to say or that you want to develop, you now have a choice of a different medium, but that's not television, you know, that hasn't got the expense of film. And I think there are new arenas being built out of that don't necessarily have to impact badly on live, you know. Sorry, Siti, can I come back to you for a second in relation to the fact of having gone through maybe a more normative, you know, slightly more normal kind of period of time, and then being aware of all, you know, this going and the building of kind of digital spaces around you. Do you think for you that things have fundamentally changed from when you started to now?
I think it changed my perspective of things, right? Like I said before, it was me coming in with this expectation, okay, I'm gonna get a full house, right? Every seat in the theater is gonna be filled by someone. But that didn't happen, even for our very first show in school, because that was like the height of COVID. And it put things into perspective for me. It not only using like cameras and Zoom as a medium, as a tool to bring across the show to the audience members, but also the attitudes of the viewers, the attitudes of the audience members. Because like we were saying earlier, how not everyone knows what theater is, and some people refuse to even try going for one theater show because they're so, how do I say this? They get very intimidated by the crowds that usually gather at theater shows, right? Because artists can seem very intimidating, or people in the art scene can seem very intimidating to someone who isn't used to such scenes. And I think with COVID, it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, because we've experimented with filming the shows, right? Making it a theater film in a sense. We've turned to podcasts, we've turned to uploading stuff on SoundCloud, everything, right? Just to get that story across. And I think it's kind of softened the edges a little bit for these audiences who have never experienced any theater shows. And in a sense, they feel more welcome they feel it's a sort of a warmer environment, if you will, just because they're not confronted with those harsh impressions, that they feel, that they get off from people in the art scene. That, at least that's what I think, because for me, I'm looking at this radical shift in a more social context. And I've been thinking about, why aren't more audience members coming in? Why aren't more members of public coming in to watch theatre shows? What has stopped them? And then I realized that, it's because they're just purely intimidated by people in the art scene, because we do give off that kind of air of arrogance, if you will, Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the couple of things you said there, one which I'm fascinated with, that you came into the arts expecting full houses every night. Fair play. But also I think the piece around welcoming rather than us trying to educate. And I think, I think that's a big shift between, we're doing outreach programs, or we're teaching you about this, or we're teaching you how to feel about this, or people will go, well, in my opinion, people go, no, you're fine, it's grand, thanks. I'm absolutely fine over here. Becky, yeah.
I just wanted to add a point that I just thought of. So I forgot it. Oh yeah, so much is happening. But anyways, for me, my perspective of theatre has changed, and this is going to segue to why I think it's going to change later, because I'm already seeing the changes now. In Singapore, we have quite a few companies that are much richer than others. I think that happens in any country, and they get a lot of the funding, they have a lot of donations, things like that. So these companies can afford to make really big, grand, commercial productions, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are great. Those are very fun to watch. But with any field, once you start making progress, your aim is to go bigger, better, bigger, more grand. But then with COVID-19, it kind of shut it down, and it just went, okay, no, you don't have that space. You can't have these many people on stage. You need to downsize. And so it forced companies like this, and not only them, but I'm just pointing them out because, it's forcing them to think about two-person plays and stories that can be told on a small scale, whether it be online or in person, but just small scale versions of grand productions. And so for me, I think theater is going to change in the sense that it's not going to be about the production anymore, how big it is. It's going to be about the human connection and the mini marvels that can be made between person to person. It's not going to be about what you see. It's going to be about what you feel a bit more. And I know that that's what theater should be to begin with, but I think maybe some practitioners forget about that. They forget about the basics of theater, which is human connection between two people. So yeah, I think the pandemic has, without it trying to, has managed to make art more genuine, I think.
Okay, that's interesting. And do you think, this is a question for kind of all of you to respond to, do you think there will be a hunger, because art has been so much part of people's lives, as in watching, reading, talking about it through the pandemic worldwide. One of the big things, certainly in Ireland, is that the importance of the arts has been very manifest in the way people have got through the last year and a half or so. So as we now say in Ireland, we're still kind of, it was only yesterday that we began to be allowed to have 50 people inside theatres with social distancing. And so it's all very kind of slow at the moment. But as we emerge, say, over the next 6 months to a year, do you think people are going to want to come back? Yeah.
The theater cult will always, as long as there's theater lovers and there's, theater makers, it will always be there. However, I see it more as a broadening of the concept of theater, which we were talking about before, which is that, yes, we'll have theater, but we'll also have other things that perhaps people who cannot access theater in their locations would be able to access online, or maybe more affordable theater online. Or, right now we're talking about, we're missing human connection. Well, through academia, this kind of, since we are, you know, students, there is now this new area for research or for you know, for looking into in terms of how do we create better contact with digital theater. And so I don't even think that we can predict what can come out of this, but you know, we are inherently creative people. So since now the idea of theater has been broadened and we've learned different skills, we've been forced to learn new skills. I think that's going to open up a lot of new doors that we may not even be aware of right now.
I think as well, someone mentioned earlier on about the area of change. And I think, you know, that people who work in theater, and the theater in its essence is about perpetual change. You know, it's kind of, it's live. It's kind of, and I think as the world has been through, you know, a year and a half of massive change, I'm just interested going back to, say, the resilience piece. Do you think that, you know, you and your peers and the people who, you know, are in your generation or are in your circles, do you think this has been, and I don't mean a good thing, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but in relation to resilience, I mean, because I know some people have struggled a huge amount within these times, even beyond the pandemic illness, but I mean, just in relation to mental health and kind of, but do you think this has kind of helped resilience building that will be of benefit down the road? Does anyone want to come in on that? Belle, yeah.
I don't think that it's collectively helped or hindered. I think it has kind of helped some people like really build their resilience, and for others, maybe given them some time to realize that this is where theater is at the moment, it's not for them and it's not what they want to do, which is like a totally valid thing and decision to make also. But yeah, I definitely, like with the cohort that we went through with, it was mental health wise such a challenging process to try and make a theatre piece with no knowing of what it was going to be at the end, on an even larger scale to how normally you don't know what it's going to be at the end, and the constant sort of feeling of the world pushing back against what you were trying to make was like way too much for some people, especially in their late teens, early 20s, to handle. And even then, just thinking about going back and watching theatre after having this experience with it, because we've had theatres open up, but now we're back in our fourth lockdown, so you don't really know what's coming next. Yeah, I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's also a piece around, you know, say the future of theatre careers rather than just the future of theatre. I think, you know, whereas there might be more opportunities in different areas which may emerge, but something you said there has always intrigued me. There's also, and I've kind of known many people throughout my career who kind of, you know, who want to leave but don't want to leave, who kind of feel like if they do something else, they're giving up on some dream. But I think the reality of when that's a very hard thing to do, because an awful lot, particularly around acting, an awful lot of it is to do with rejection or things that you're not in control of at all, you know, unless you gather a group of people together around you and make your own work and form your own company. So I think coming out of a time of complete uncertainty, it's not going to necessarily, you know, I worry when we all say, oh, we're back now to normal, everything's going to be great. Well, what does that actually mean? You know, the career path is still going to be the same. You know, it's still going to be built on passion and drive and, you know, on a bit of kind of, you know, gathering people around you and making the right choices. And just before I kind of start to wrap up, is there anything kind of from the conversation that we've had already that's something burning in your heads, either a question for each other or a question for me or something you want to say? Yes, Adrian.
Yeah, a few of us talked about just that connection, how what's so great about theater, the reason people will always come back to theater is because of that connection. The same reason people come back to live music all the time. It's that connection, right? It's being able to go somewhere and see somebody perform something for you, for this group of people, right? And I think that's something that has been missing in recent, at least of what I've seen in recent years, is the connection with the audience, right? Because we talk a lot about connection, we talk a lot about connection with other people, but we usually mean other performers. And I think part of why so many people, I mean, because again, like Moyukh was saying, there's always going to be that group of theater goers, and they're always going to go see theater, they're always going to love live theater, but aside from them, we've made it almost too intimidating and pretentious for the casual viewer to see, right? Which is why I think personally, stuff like they did Rent live, they did Grease live, they're doing all these things live, and they're pre-recording these things, and they're designing these shows in a way to be pre-packaged, to be delivered to the home viewer, that can hopefully get them interested to see the live show, right? And so I think that's something that we like really need to bring back. We need to stop thinking about it as here's some show, some piece of work where the fourth wall is closed off. I think we need to break it completely down and really get back to those fundamental elements of storytelling, so that the audience can actually feel like they're going to see something enjoyable. It feels like they're part of it, without inviting them to just, you know, call out and heckle and all that stuff that everybody hates, right?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it's
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
No. That's sorry. I was going to say there's a lot of nodding screens that I'm looking at from what you were saying, and I think it's been part of something. I think that for me is the huge thing in a society that's becoming more and more fragmented. Even though we're all connected, it's bizarrely more fragmented than it ever was. That actually being in a space with somebody, experiencing something with them at the same time, is an extraordinary thing. You know, it's like going to cinema with someone, or going by yourself, or, you know, or standing in a field with 80,000 other people who love the band that you're watching, or standing there by yourself, which, you know, be kind of a bit boring. So I think, yeah, I think that I think you've named something there which I think is hugely important for us to continue to remind ourselves about the future of theatre. It's about being part of something, and that we have a space that we can invite other people in to be part of. That I think where the pretentiousness sometimes comes out of is, in my opinion, from theatre people thinking they own theatre. You're kind of going, well, no, nobody owns. Like that's saying that someone can put a patent on breathing. You know what I mean? You kind of can't really own something that's a natural occurrence. If nobody has anything else to say, I'm going to wrap that up on a positive note, of that the future of theatre with you guys around the world looks extraordinarily bright, and it's been my absolute privilege to spend the last 50 minutes talking to you. Thanks very much. Should I give yourselves a round of applause? And then hopefully, it's gone off Facebook. There you go.